Hello, this is Nelson Sear, Senior Discovery TV, City of Reno. And we're here celebrating the Reno 150 project. It's Reno's 150th birthday, and I'm here with Alicia Barber this morning. And Alicia, you are author of Reno's Big Gamble, is that correct?
That's right.
And you're also an independent historian.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining our program. We're looking forward to hearing about your take on the journey that Reno's had over the last 150 years.
It's been a long one, huh? Lots of twists and turns for Reno.
Reno has an incredible setting. It's a small city still. It's in the middle of a gorgeous natural landscape with the mountains and the foothills so close at hand. And the city's growing, but at its core, there's still so much of its heritage left that we can actually look at a lot of these landscapes in downtown and envision what Reno was like decades and decades and even a century ago. Some of our most beautiful historic buildings remain by the river. We can picture the different bridges that have existed over time, over that rushing Truckee, and I think feel a connection to the past in a way that a lot of other cities might not be able to do. We have the casinos in Reno. Our ranches are further afield, although what's really interesting about Reno is that you can be driving along in some part of the city and suddenly look over and there's some cattle over on the side of the road. That's still such an important part of not only Reno's heritage, but its identity and its current identity too. I mean, we really do have those roots in ranching. We have those roots in the casinos and in gambling, and those are important things for us to remember and to celebrate, because these are things that have always made Reno unique and continue to make Reno unique today.
I'm here with Jack Harpster, author of the Genesis of Reno, and we're both here to talk about the Reno 150 Celebration Project. Jack, thank you for coming, joining our program.
Thank you for inviting me. I think we'll have a lot of fun with this.
Great. Let's get started.
William Charles Fuller came over to the Truckee Meadows from California in 1859. The Comstock had also started in 1859, and there was a need for food on the Virginia Range on the other side of the Truckee Meadows. He built his at what is today Virginia Street. Built his bridge in 1860. He had built a hotel and inn there, a tavern, in 1859. And that's where Reno began. As I mentioned, to 1862 and 1863, when there was an arc storm in the Truckee Meadows. Both the bridge and the inn were destroyed, and Myron Lake rebuilt both of them. There have been a total of, I believe it's 6 Virginia Street bridges since the first one. The first 3 were wooden bridges. Then they built the Iron Bridge. And then in 1905, the Iron Bridge was replaced by the first concrete bridge, which was built and guaranteed, I believe it was for 50 years, and it lasted 105 years. And the final Virginia Street Bridge, which was finally completed in 2016, and it was on, at the completion of the bridge that my book was published. We had kind of held off a little until the bridge was finished, so it could contain some pictures of the final building of the bridge. As for the hotel itself went through a bunch of metamorphoses itself. It burned down a couple of times. It was renamed the Lake House by Myron Lake at some point, and became extremely successful because there was so much traffic through Reno and everything, both by train and because of all the ranches and farming that was going on in the area. So the hotel was quite prosperous from the very beginning. It burned down again in the early 1900s, was eventually rebuilt in 1927 into the same basic structure that we see there today. was designed by Frederick de Longchamps, Nevada's most famous architect. And as gaming continued to grow in the 20th century and everything, and tourism grew, and the divorce trade grew in the city of Reno, the hotel, the Riverside Hotel, as it became known in 1888 finally, continued to grow and prosper right along with it.
Well, Jack, thank you for joining us today. Appreciate your coming out. You're a great historian, and I really enjoyed your book, The Genesis of Reno.
Thank you.
And looking forward to seeing this interview on our program. Thank you again.
I appreciate being here. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, hello. This is Nelson Sear with Senior Discovery TV, and we are doing the Reno 150 Celebration Project, and with me here today is Neal Cobb, Reno's preeminent historian. Neal, welcome today. Glad to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I'm a recognized historian. I wouldn't say preeminent. What I really like to talk about is the education I got being Pappy Smith's son-in-law at Harold's Club, and the things that I learned from the inside. And Harold's Club's history really brought gaming to the forefront with a good reputation as opposed to what they had before. From 1935, when they broke into Virginia Street, the two brothers were sent up here by Pappy, and to go ahead and open this hole-in-the-wall thing. They were carnies that were down in Santa Cruz. And they were being harassed by the police and payoffs and this and that and the other thing. I say, wait a minute, it's legal in Nevada. Let's see what we can do up there. They applied the same kind of a philosophy to gaming as they did with the prizes that you got when you go to the carnival. And what do you have to do to bring in more action? You send out winners. Now, in the carnival, it'd be in the form of teddy bears walking around with some little kid that his dad got it for him. If you get into the adult entertainment on the gaming, you have to send out winners. You have no room at all for dishonesty. You're working with the odds. The odds are your friend. That's what keeps you in business. How you become successful is creating more volume, more players. Send out more winners, you get more players. When I was married to Betty, I had the honor of being called off my crap table. I was a crap dealer there in 1961, 2, and 3. And having heart-to-heart because he was checking on me, is what he was doing. Well, when I answered all the questions he wanted, then I got to ask him questions. What the heck is a 60-40 machine? Have you any idea? Take 1,000 pulls. We're going to give 600 of them back to you. 400, whether that's nickel machine, penny machine, dime machine, doesn't make any difference what the coinage. The odds, even one that's 97% payback, that's ridiculous. Well, even at that long range, on a dollar machine out of 10,000 pulls, you've got $300. Right. And you only have 1 or 2 of those in the entire establishment. Those are the cause of the commotion. Here's all of the coins dropping. It was an art, the way they merchandised, how the machines flowed as far as walking patterns and the rest of this. Why they wanted the dropping of the coins in that bucket to make as much noise as possible in generating winners. It's like seeing a guy across the river. He's pulling in the fish. My God, I got to get over there. Yeah, same thing. So you have things like that. But another fun story that I like to talk about, all of our name tags came out, and they were Neal Cobb, Reno, Nevada, which was kind of funny because most people say, where are you really from? You know, nobody's from Reno, Nevada. Well, I got news from you. Yes, we are. But what they used that for, when I asked him about it, you know, like Gertrude Lean, she had Butte, Montana on hers. Well, guess where all the people from Montana went? And when I asked him this, it was funny because I thought about that when he's about to answer the question. He reaches inside his jacket pocket, pulls out Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, thumbs right to the page that said the man's most prized possession is his identity. Wow. It's an icebreaker. You want the people to have somebody to show how friendly and congenial that we are welcoming our friends from these different states. I mean, he was common sense master marketer, and his son Harold was the same way. It was like Twyla Smith. You had two different sides of Harold's Club. It was fun. If you were one of Pappy's, which I was, but if Harold hired you, Pappy stayed away from those employees. You were on one team or the other, and they just didn't cross. Another story I like to tell, and it is so natural that it fell into place. We knew, bar none, that we were the best shop in town. Our store, Harold's Club, was #1, period. Well, guess what? The people over there at Harris thought the same thing about where they worked. Mm-hmm. And it wound up being a bit of a contest. And do you know who won? The customer.
Of course.
Plain and simple. And it was another by design. You still had this image, and some of these people left over that when they delegalized gaming in 1910 were still people that owned properties. In 1931, they were either back in action or at least they had money into it. But Center Street wasn't a good place to go gamble. Harold's Club broke into Virginia Street, and they made this another complete operation. They had to be creative. They put on the fireworks for years and years and years, trying to pay back to the community that's been so good to them. Right. Along with all of those, where there was an artist by the name of Paul Nyland. And Paul Nyland did all of the illustrations for the Pioneers books that were so popular that they gave out. And there was a big deal honoring the pioneers. On the top of the mural itself that was put up in October of 1949, it said, dedicated in all humility to those that blazed the trail. And it was they had a huge respect for this nation and for the military and for the people that laid it all out for what we have now. Mm-hmm. It was important to the Smith family to pay back to the community. And they had to come up with ideas like that during the time frame before things finally changed around. They're the ones that pushed big time for not just U.S. Highway 40 being 4 lanes to get people over here, but to have a control other than being self-policed. And they pushed real hard to have a group with authority that could ride herd on the gaming people that should not be licensed and employees and so on. They pushed and pushed and pushed. So they were successful in 1955 by creating the Gaming Control Board, and then in 1959 the Gaming Control Commission. And that was big time, because in the early 60s, when you had a national star up there at the Calvada, Frank Sinatra, and he's consorting with mafiosos, they pulled his license. And you couldn't have been able to do anything like that the way it was run until you had a strong body to enforce. And Harold's Club is one of the leaders of the pack that really pushed that. And they worked with the other casinos that were on Casino Row, the 200 block, and were able to show some clout. And the more successful they were, the more they were listened to. And they grew to be, in 1959, they were the world's largest casino in the world. Really? In the world. Wow. So, I mean, they went from having a roulette or box thing with a rack going down the number. Yeah, and the big wheels, the rest of it just... I don't even know if they had a slot machine to start with. When Pappy died in 1967, in 68, they went ahead and, to honor him, the Riverwalk is named after Pappy Smith. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's the fellow his bust is in that glass encasement.
I guess
Then-
that confirms what I read in one of the local history books about ex-employees of Harold's Club still being loyal 30 years later.
I've been the president of that organization a half a dozen times,
Wow.
and we still meet, but we've losing members right and left. We had one run 2 years ago. In 18 months, we lost 16 members. But these are wonderful people. This was a family-orientated business, and it went all the way down to the employees. And I know of no other organization around that honors their ex-employee like Harold's Club did. This was a magic place to be, and it was a leader in so many different ways. They put Reno on the map, and you know how they did that? Well, number one, the people that visited told other people, and they come back. And mix that up with 2,300 billboards that were across the nation.
Wow.
Harold's Club or bust. Said nothing at all what Harold's Club was. Just Harold's Club or bust, Reno, Nevada. And so people, curiosity, they come. Some of them had no idea it was a casino.
Great marketing.
Oh, masters at marketing.
So the whole game has changed since Harold's.
Yeah, well, they did everything against the regular operations. They had signs all through the club. Please do not gamble more than you can afford to lose.
In the first decades of the 20th century, Reno really developed a character and a personality that no other place in the United States had, and that was a function of a couple of things. One was legalizing gambling in 1931. There had been gambling in Reno and Nevada before throughout the West, but legalizing it gave it that air of respectability, and it meant it could be regulated. So that made people feel a lot more safe and comfortable with the idea of coming to Reno, to coming to a casino. And of course, the advent of casinos like Harold's Club, which promoted itself as a fun, entertaining, respectable place for people to go gamble and just have a good time, meant that men and women felt comfortable in places like that. Some of the other things that Reno had that made it unique were, of course, the divorce trade. You could get divorces in Nevada faster than you could anywhere else. And Reno was the largest city in the state until about 1950, 1960, when Las Vegas surpassed it. So Reno had a lot of the culture and entertainment and attractions that really attracted people. And so it was a tourist destination very, very early on. At the same time, in addition to all the attractions that Reno had for tourists and for divorce seekers, it was a bona fide ranching area. So there were actually real cowboys, and that was very appealing to a lot of people. Reno came by that ranching heritage naturally. It had been an agricultural center of ranching and farming throughout its entire history, back to the days when the Truckee Meadows was a support center agriculturally for the Comstock lode and the mining and logging operations. So through about 1960, Reno, the city, ended around Plum Lane, which we now think of as being the middle of the city. But at that time, prior to the 1960s, everything south of Plum Lane was ranches and farms, except for what was lining the highway to Carson. The combination of having a lot of tourist attractions, of being a place where people could get divorces, of being an educational center, a cultural center, the county seat, in addition to this charm and friendliness and Western hospitality that came out of the ranching heritage made it truly unique, and people were just fascinated by Reno. The combination of all those things also made it a really great place to live. Reno, by the mid-20th century, was still a small town, but it was very cosmopolitan. And you could see in the slogan, the biggest little city in the world, you see these two things coming together. The fact that Reno was a charming, small city, but at the same time, very sophisticated and cosmopolitan. For its size, it was big, and it was big in culture, it was big in personality. A lot of that combination of the Western hospitality, the ranching heritage, but also this kind of upscale glamour and elegance of Reno really came through in the Mapes Hotel Casino. When that was built in 1947, it was actually constructed by a ranching family, the Mapes family, and the sign that they had for the Mapes were the two cowboys with their interlocking legs to make the M. And it was really known as a place that welcomed everyone from cowboys to movie stars to celebrities. and had a sky room, had incredible showroom and entertainment there. To many people, the Mapes really symbolized that uniqueness that Reno had of bringing, the small town and the big city together. The El Dorado Hotel Casino was the first casino to open north of the railroad tracks in 1973, and it took on a theme that was very different from the American West themes that had dominated a lot of the casinos in downtown Reno. It took on kind of a Spanish theme, a lot of black and gold, a little more European in influence. And the MGM Grand, when that opened in 1978, was just a spectacular Hollywood-themed hotel casino. Of course, the biggest in the world at that point, with the biggest stage in the world. The construction and opening of the MGM Grand in 1978 really changed everything. Downtown Reno was the residence Reno. That was where the shops, the department stores, the restaurants, everything was for the residents too. And when you wanted to have these big hotel casinos, there wasn't really room to build something the scale of the MGM. So they had to go a mile east of town, way out on Mill Street, to construct something that large. Well, what happened in the 1970s is a lot of other casinos started to expand as well. And whereas earlier in Reno's history, the casinos had often been in existing buildings, or they had kind of knocked down walls to expand into existing buildings, they started to knock down full city blocks and build enormous hotel casinos with their parking garages, with all of their hotel towers. And the 1970s is really where that expanded and began to kind of take over the landscape of downtown Reno. Nevada really had the market cornered on legalized gaming in the United States until the late 1970s. Atlantic City voted to legalize gaming in 1976 and opened their first casinos in 1978. At the same time, a number of different tribes throughout the country were looking at legalizing gambling in some of the mining towns in Colorado, riverboat casinos throughout the southeast, and then kind of in other places throughout the eastern part of the country were opening in the 1980s too. Suddenly, Nevada had competition. Reno had already experienced a lot of competition from Las Vegas, which by the opening of its mega resorts in the 80s, like the Mirage and the Aladdin, and all the larger ones to follow, there wasn't really a great deal of direct competition between Reno and Las Vegas anymore. But it was really the advent of the legalized gaming throughout the rest of the country that had a big impact on Reno, particularly the opening of tribal casinos that were in between the Bay Area and Reno, so people could actually get to those without crossing the Sierra. We started to see the decline of some of the casinos, especially the smaller family-owned casinos, in the early 1980s. The Mapes Hotel closed, the Riverside closed, the Money Tree, and so we started to see some vacant properties downtown. And really through the 1980s and the 1990s, it was kind of a troubling period for the gaming industry in Reno in particular. There was a real call to try to diversify the economy, as well as to redevelop the areas of downtown that had started to look kind of downtrodden with a lot of these vacant properties, or even sometimes vacant land where casinos had been. The construction of the Silver Legacy was actually kind of bucking against the tide in the early 1990s when casinos had been closing, but here was one that opened. And what the Silver Legacy allowed to do was, as a joint venture between the El Dorado and the Circus, it could actually physically connect to those two with skyways and with all sorts of combined kind of collaborative activities. So that meant that people could stay inside for all of those properties and not have to go anywhere outside. And that was it's been very successful to have that venture together with that common ownership. As we look toward the future now, I think Reno is seeing that there will always be casinos, there will always be a gaming industry in Reno, and that's something that's desirable. But at the same time, it's important that there is more also. Starting really kind of throughout its history, but I would say kind of stepping up in the early 2000s, the promotional machinery for Reno really started to emphasize outdoor recreation and looking at how you could do a lot of these indoor activities in Reno, but also that connection to the outside and to Tahoe and to the river and all the incredible opportunities that people could so easily get to were right in the middle of town. That really became a focus of the promotion for the city, and also something that residents were increasingly very interested in also. Reno's relationship to its image has really varied over time. Sometimes the image that Reno has had in the eyes of the public has been completely a function of what was offered here, what was happening here. It was a mining area, and that might be considered sort of frontier-like and wild to some people. Or the fact that there was gambling. To some people was an exciting thing, and to others meant that it was sinful. The fact that it was a divorce center, to some signified this was a place where women could get out of bad marriages, and men too. And that was a part of kind of a national rights kind of moment. To others, it was the sign of dissolution of marriages and violations of the sanctity of marriage. So sometimes the image of Reno was very much a function of what did people think of what was happening here? Were they approving of it or not? At other times, the image has been a function of how the place looked. And I think when there has been when downtown has been struggling a little bit, when, especially in the 1980s and 1990s, when some casinos started to close, you had vacant properties, downtown had become such a tourist center, the department stores had moved out, the residents didn't really shop there or really do much downtown outside of the casinos anymore. Then it became something where this looked like a kind of a barren space. And so that image that had largely focused on that downtown casino core then suffered from the fact that that was still what people considered to be the heart of Reno. And if it didn't look good, then Reno had kind of a bad reputation. Today, I think there's an understanding that trying to improve Reno's image is a combination of things. It's a combination of diversifying the economy. So Reno has a stable footing economically. So it's known for more than casinos. Now we have the high-tech industry, but we have a lot of other industries too. We have the warehousing industry, we have the medical industry. The university, of course, is very important to Reno's image. But in addition to that, it is about the landscape. It is about how that downtown core looks. And so trying to improve that landscape, add more infill, make it a safer, more appealing place is part of Reno's image also. So we see that there's efforts and successes in both of these areas to try to improve how the place looks and how people associate different economies and industries with Reno. You know, in many ways, it seems that Reno's challenge is to kind of consider itself just a regular city. I think throughout Reno's history, it has gained such national attention for being unique in many ways, for having this incredible successful and strange divorce industry, for having legalized gambling, for having its casinos. A lot of cities aren't known for any one thing. In the 19th century, a lot of Midwestern cities were known for a certain kind of industry, right? Or we associated Detroit with cars. A lot of other cities are going through this experience where they're trying to kind of let go of being known for just one thing and just being known as being a great city, as being a good place to live, as a fun place to visit with a lot of different things to do. And I think looking forward, if Reno can kind of keep that in mind, that we're always best when we focus on what makes Reno special, our river, our heritage, our setting in the mountains, and really a constant advocacy of freedom. You know, Reno has really stood for freedom throughout its history, whether it was a freedom to be yourself, to get a divorce, to gamble, you know, to pursue any kind of activities that you want to do. That's not a bad thing to be associated with freedom. So I think if we can keep that in mind and be sort of open to what possibilities exist for Reno and remembering our heritage, we're going to be in really good shape. Reno's had an incredibly varied and rich first 150 years. It'll be very exciting to see what the next 150 years hold. And I want to wish the city of Reno a very happy birthday and can't wait to see what comes next.